Can you see from there? Can you see from there? Okay. Okay. So there's a few people outside. I guess they're on their way. But I wanted to discuss the theme of the reality that we live in. Reality. What we accept to be real. You can name it life, you can name it the world, but we don't normally call it life or the life. We call it my life. We call it my situation, my circumstances, my ... You just go ahead and add whatever you feel like. My problems, my this, my that. So reality as such fortunately, finally, we have science catching up with the Dhamma, where they talk about the input that we get from the senses, the six senses, as the data, as the thing that helps the brain to understand and identify this thing called reality and see it as something solid. Mine. We don't say solid world, we don't say solid. We say my world, which includes my job, loved ones, which means problems, right? You can't have loved ones without problems. Co-workers, with the job situation. But we're always gathering information, and we're always interpreting them, but unfortunately with the filter of ignorance, as far as the Dhamma is concerned. That's how we see it. And even they had this group of scientists early in the 20th century when they were discovering quantum physics, quantum mechanics. And they said the Heisenberg theory, not just theory, it became proven because the way that we look at a molecule, an atom, an electron, especially an electron, it was changing the very character of the electron, the way that the scientists would look at it. And they also saw that the proton, which is the positively charged portion of nucleus of the atom, basically, not the nucleus, but the atom is made of the neutron, the proton, and then the electron goes around it at almost the speed of light. It was both a wave and a particle. That really shook their idea of reality. And then when they were able to probe further into the atom, they saw that the electron is changing its character depending on how you are looking at it. So we, the person, the observer, has the ability to change reality. Because when there was a sound, there's two objects that we all agree on. One is the ground, the other one is the marker. They touched, right? Not necessarily. Electrons touched each other, going at very, very high speeds, as I said, almost the speed of light. Because most reality that we know it is in fact empty space. So if I were to teach this subject briefly as, let's say, a science, physical science or physics class, it would be something like this. So think of this as the atom, which people are now able to take pictures of. In the center, you have two things. One is the neutron, and usually a smaller piece, which is the positive charge. And this little guy, which is deceiving us into thinking that it is the atom, but it's moving at such high speeds that it will shift its position depending on who's looking at it and how you're looking at it and what you're expecting to see. This is the electron. Sometimes it's written here, it doesn't matter, but electron. This is the proton, the positive, and this is the neutron. The heaviest part of the nucleus, this is called the nucleus, by the way. The heaviest part is the neutron. Now, this is making us see all that you see. Electrons. Things are not really touching. In fact, there are no things as such. It's mostly empty space. They say it is about, the distance is about 1,800 times the distance. Well, the objects, basically, the width of it, it's 1,800. First of all, it's 1,800 times smaller than the proton. And the proton is very small already. Of course, each material, we have the periodic table, and we have over 100 items, objects, or elements, to be specific. Each of them will have different ones. This is basically hydrogen. One electron, one proton, one neutron. So, and they keep adding. So this is just a very, very, very brief view of the scientific aspect of the reality that we visually, or in this case also auditorily, we heard it. These two things impacted each other. But what did impact is the electrons, they just hit each other. Yesterday I was talking about lust leads to rust, right? We were using the example of metal. You leave it outside. What is oxidation? Oxidation is when you have one element tearing up, it's stealing. Oxygen is a very notorious thief as an element because it is missing a few electrons. So, but it has other electrons, but it is looking for, because it has different shells. So I don't want to go into too many, but the inner, too many detail that is, the inner shell of an atom or an element can have no more than 2, but the outer shells can have up to 8 or even more. So now they have to jump, and there's more and more and more. But oxygen has a few missing. So what it does is it will steal from other elements. The metal, the iron has electrons, which oxygen comes, hey, come, I'm going to take it away. And that's how we call it oxidation. That's where the rust comes. It steals it. It steals the electrons from the orbiting shell of the electron of that particular element. So long as it is not full, that is. So, which I'm not going to get into that. And it's going to be a science class. But I just wanted to give you a very, very faint, just superficial layer of type of an understanding of physics, of reality. Okay, now how does that relate to the living experience? We take it for granted that there is this and there's that, the marker and the ground. You and I, the chair, the covers of the chair, you sitting on the chair, all these things. But even science today is proving that, in fact, there's no such thing. We have just accepted that there's a chair. This is something that Lord Buddha had said, and scientists or philosophers from Asia have been saying that for all these centuries. We accept reality to be the way it is. Now, how does that relate to us? I mentioned how we look at the solid world, but in essence, what we're talking about is my world. When we're talking about my world, I'm talking about the person, is talking about consciousness. What was it? Yeah. Consciousness. Someone was asking me questions about consciousness, and I said, well, we have to be clear what you mean by consciousness, because if you're looking at it from a Western point of view, consciousness is seen in opposition to unconscious mind. Let's say conscious mind and unconscious mind. There's that. So we usually have one umbrella term, consciousness. The person lost their consciousness. Especially when you're coming to Buddhism, into the Dhamma, from that understanding, that worldview, it's really going to be challenging for you to understand or to even consider that Lord Buddha talked about 6 consciousnesses. Yes, consciousnesses, 6. There isn't one. What we presume, and to this day, unfortunately, psychiatrists, biologists, evolutionary psychologists, evolutionary biologists, philosophers in the West, they always talk about the consciousness and what is it that moves from life to life, for example, what's happening when the person goes to sleep, who is it that is dreaming. So they usually narrow it down to just biological things, which is typical of Western way of thinking. So on one hand, they say there's this thing, solid, but then the other, they say there is nothing. It's confusing. There's not a step-by-step process. So when we are talking about the Dhamma, fortunately, there is the Dhamma where Lord Buddha explains as to what it is that the person is, well, what we're referring to as the person. 6 consciousnesses. There's the eye, there's the ear, there's the nose, there's the tongue, there's the body, and there is the mind. Hence, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 consciousnesses. Okay? Chakku is the eye, for example, sota and whatnot, gahya. But what I wanted to mention is the reason why I want to discuss this, because we have a tendency of thinking, remember the solid world I was referring to? We look at each of these consciousnesses as solid. That's the problem. And in our ignorance, what we also do is we look at all these as the equivalent of the person. Meaning the person who is conscious, the person who has a solid personality. Solid personality. Lord Buddha comes and says, first of all, you have many consciousnesses, 1. Second, they're always changing. You don't have just I consciousness all the time. Did you hear it? You're looking at me. All of you are looking at me. So that was I consciousness. And then I just quieted myself. I just closed my mouth for a millisecond. And then suddenly, what came into purview? What showed up? What happened? The sound of the AC, the fans, right? What happened? What is that? First you had I consciousness. Suddenly it's shifted. Now you had the predominance of ear consciousness. Well, guess what? When you're getting an itch, what is that? Whoop! Body consciousness. Suddenly, the smell. You hear, you see, you get a whiff of something, good or bad. and everything drops millisecond. And now your awareness goes to where? Nose consciousness. And then the car passes by, whoop, you go back to ear consciousness. And then I say, look over here. Your ears say, okay, there's something going on. Eyes, take over. So now you're back with the eyes. But the big processor of all these is the mind. Because without the mind, none of these will go into action. Mind is the great disassembler of consciousnesses. It dissects. It dissects. You know, in biology labs, we dissect animals and things, organisms and things. But when you are doing meditation, what you are learning in this tradition, you're learning to use the scalpel of mindfulness. You know what a scalpel is? Sharp, sharp knife that surgeons use to make incisions to go into the body. Mindfulness is that sharp. Well, at least we're trying to get it to that sharpness. To do what? Really, dissect, disassemble what? Well, I'm going to erase some of this. Are you following so far? Is this okay? Because I'd rather discuss or talk about things that really is going to help your understanding of what's going on. What is it that I'm doing? When Bhante says, or when the books say mindfulness, what is it that I'm being mindful of? Okay, so what? I watch the body. I watch my body touch the surface. Getting up, sitting down. Okay, I'm being watchful. I'm being mindful. Yesterday, Brother Tio asked, what is sati and sampajanya? Of what? What am I being, using mindfulness and clear comprehension, understanding, full alertness of what? What is it that I'm doing? Am I because the mind is going to go into analysis mode. That is not the practice. Okay? Sati and sampajanya I mentioned. Sati plus sampajanya, mindfulness, and clear understanding I prefer better. These two things are allowing you to help the process of dissection. Of what? Reality. If you are old enough, you will know that in the 80s, we had the VHS tape, videotape came up. Before that, there was the cassette tape. My father used to own a cassette tape store. And I would see how he would, sometimes people would bring in their favorite cassettes and sometimes they would have jammed in the machine. So my dad would take it outside, and sometimes it was like totally hopeless. And I would feel bad because it's gone, like, it's been turned into knots. So there's no way of saving that recording. But what he would do is he would clip the edges that were still fixable. And then he would have special tapes, and he would bring these two strips of the cassette tape, and he would put it, obviously he wouldn't leave this gap. I'm just showing it for demonstration purposes. So he would put it, and now very carefully use special scissors he had to make it perfect so that it would run through the tape recorder or tape player. Now, years later, I found myself doing something similar to that when I got into video editing and doing Photoshop, this and that, because I was also an artist and I saw everything was changing from traditional drawing to digital. And I hated that because that meant I have to learn computers. I was working with canvases and things, and now I had to put all those down and make it modern. So I learned how they have the same technique when you're doing a video editing. What do I mean? A video movie goes at 24 frames per second. That means, just like in the case of a cassette tape, any movie you pick, any advertising, commercial, animation is what I started with, learning this. If you see Mickey Mouse, if you see a rabbit jumping, in order for your eyes to be able to see it as a movie, first of all, each of these are still shots. They are still images. They are not moving. They don't move. But if you run it through a wheel, now the 24 frames per second, I'm not going to draw 24, but basically when they're going fast enough, you know, it's got these place for the teeth to go for the camera. So you have these images. Suddenly, these images come to life because your eyes are not able to catch the still images. It's not like 1, 2, 3. It now becomes more of a flow. All movies that you see, including the ones that you see in your, you know, on your phone or something, even this, it's going to be taken shot by shot, but then put together at a certain speed. The slowest is 24 frames. It can go faster. But anything less than that, let's say you say 23 frames per second, suddenly your eyes are going to notice something weird. They're going to notice tick, 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 instead of a flow. Now, why do I say this? Because our lives have become this, a movie, in the sense that the consciousness that we say, it's my consciousness. Lord Buddha comes and asks, what do you mean, my consciousness? Then, if we study a little, we say, well, Bhante, what I mean by that is the collection of my eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. Ah! Do you remember the exercise we just did earlier? Just now, about... Did you see it? Did you see it? Did you hear it? The quiet? You were watching me, you were hearing me, and then I stopped. And then your mind kicked in and said, what's going on? Why is there quiet? All these consciousness come in and out depending on what is the predominant sensory input. So all this jumble, all this stuff put together, mashed together, is what we call me, myself, and this is who I am. Lord Buddha calls this the conceit I am, asmimana. This is the basis of ignorance. Because this is allowing us to say, this is Bhante Candana, this is you, this is Joe, this is Richie, this is me, this is you. But which part of you are we talking about? Because the you is always changing. Well, this is not meant to really confuse us or to make us lose ground of reality, but simply to disassemble the false idea that we have of reality, the solidity that we think we are or we exist in. That's why when you're sitting to meditate, you start fighting. with yourself, with your body, with your tendencies, with your mind, with ideas, concepts, tendencies. But you must take them really seriously. You must give them, attribute to them a personality, a thingness. This is a thing. A thing. So there's the eye consciousness, there's the nose, there's the ear, there's the tongue. What are we left? Oh, there's body and there's mind. So all these are bringing us information from the outside world constantly. Constantly, and we are being influenced by them all the time. But there is no do you see? There's no sati looking at what's going on. There isn't. Mindfulness is allowing us, when we practice meditation, it's giving us the opportunity to look at really what's coming in through the eyes. Yesterday, I gave the discourse on Methuna Sutta, sexual lust. Remember? And you saw how Lord Buddha again and again talks about the bhikkhu guarding his thoughts, his body, his eyes, his ears, everything. When he's walking on Pindapada to go through the village, he's going to hear things, he's going to see things, he's going to smell things. But is sati there with him to observe him picking up all this data, including the mind, which many of us are very fascinated with? This means concepts. What today we have is a lot of Buddhist practitioners, or what they think they are practitioners, but in fact, they are academicians. They are just bookworms, or retreat worms, or I don't know, Dhamma talk rabbits. They keep hopping from one Dhamma talk to the next, whether it's digital or whether it's real, expecting themselves to be growing with each Dhamma talk. Nonsense. We have to apply sati so that we can see where is the biggest preponderance of this influence coming from. What is the door that is the one without, off the hinges? Where are the rats coming from? Why am I being influenced by this? Today, we were talking earlier during an interview about YouTube videos, right? It's free. In fact, as if that's not enough, you look at, if you have Facebook or something like that, they also put video clips there, short ones, so that you can think to yourself, well, at least it's like 30 seconds. It's like 1 minute. Come on. But they are attached to other video clips. And guess what? AI is watching. AI is watching, meaning it is looking, and the phone has a camera, in case you didn't know, the camera is looking at you, even when you think it's not. Your voice is also being recorded, even though you think it's not. This is not conspiracy, this is a fact. Your camera, your phone camera, is there as you're scrolling through the videos, watching your pupils where it's looking at, and it knows through special algorithms, it knows what's projected on your phone screen. Hence, it does the very quick calculation to look at your pupils and know exactly which part of the screen you're looking at and what is there to be looking at. Hence, it predicts the next video. A few years ago, I was watching something and on YouTube. It was something about Italy, and they were speaking Italian, and I was looking at something and I said, that's an interesting thing I'm looking at. The patterns on this, it was a very unusual jacket that a person was wearing. And I said, that's very unusual jacket. The colors, the patterns. Now, I turn off that, I stopped that YouTube video, and I'm now looking at something else on Amazon. Guess what I see? Not exactly that same jacket, but very similar in its weirdness of patterns. I was actually looking to get like shaving stuff. On the side, you see these things advertised. Either that or it was Google, one of these two. But it was something that I was not looking for or to find. It showed up. Now, the problem was that when I said this is a very unusual jacket, I was not speaking English. I was speaking Armenian. Look how fast it moved. And it was a smart TV too, so it was also watching where we were watching. Just not to scare you, but this is a fact. So when you are scrolling through the YouTube video, guess what? They're also scrolling you. Scrolling through your consciousnesses, plural. Now, the problem is, again and again and again, the absence of sati. Let me write sati here so you know as to what the eyeball represents. This is missing. This is missing. Why though? Lord Buddha and his Arya Savakas, whenever they gave discourses on the sixth sense objects, they always insisted on the objects themselves not being the problem. Okay? It's not the eye, it's not the object that is the problem. Then what is? It's the craving. It's the lust. That is being generated within the person. There are no guards at the station. Think of these as a palace, and this is a palace, and all these sixes are the doors to the castle. In fact, that's what they're called often in the suttas, the sixth sense doors or sixth sense spheres. Because there is asati, which is mindlessness. The person is unaware what's going on. All kinds of junk flow in. So when you are watching YouTube or anything, you are, and without sati, you're not aware of what you're watching, what you're looking at, or what you're listening to. You're allowing all the enemies to come in, the spies of the enemies to flow in through the doors. And then you try to sit to meditate. What happens? The same thing that happens when your castle is invaded by the enemy forces. Suddenly you have fires. Suddenly your people are dying and you don't know why. Suddenly you can't sit. Suddenly you're itching, you're scratching, you're moving, you're fighting with yourself. Why? Because somebody said something yesterday to you and you let the mind be too lax and too relaxed and too ignorant of its impact on you, and you just said, no, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And then 24 hours later, you're shadow boxing with it during your meditation. So you put all your life's problems into one basket. What you'll be doing is you're dealing with the six senses. How well you maintain observation skills over these means whether you have, basically it's indicative. It's related to the level of sati or its absence. So if you're finding yourself dealing with a lot of hindrances, that means you are not guarding your sense doors. That's why Lord Buddha was extremely, well, he had a very strong position about restraint. Restraint is so important because throughout samsara, we've had unrestrained sense consciousnesses. Open. The doors are wide open. So don't blame the rats. If your house is infested with rats, close the door. Last week in the other retreat, I was mentioning the importance of the four right efforts. They're part of right efforts, samma vayama. But the first one is to prevent. Close the door so that the rats don't come in. That's the first one. Second, clean up anything that's popping its head out, like stuff, other rats that are still here. Remove them. But you must first close the entry point. You must place guard there. So these two aspects of right effort involve the unwholesome, the akusala, the thing that damages you. You follow me? Now, the other two aspects of right effort involve the positive, the kusala. Now, you must make sure that there's nice breeze coming in. You clean up all the dirt and the poop that the rats left. You completely wipe the place clean. Not a speck is left. Right? And then what do? You make sure that you maintain that level of protection of that space. So every time you have a hindrance, instead of just rushing back to the object, you make sure your doors are locked and safe. Your distractions are blocked immediately. By not dwelling on the hindrance, that's what I mean. And what do? You need to introduce relaxed step. You need to smile, which are, by the way, kusala. They are wholesome qualities. They're wholesome because you're relaxing into, okay, and then you slide back to the object of meditation. There you go, right effort. Now, what was briefly mentioned yesterday is the yoniso manasikara, which is wise reflection, wise attention. So we need to know where the wise attention or the attention needs to go. Manasikara, which is one of the nama group, manasikara, of nama rupa, is attention. But it could go the other way and become wrong attention. So if I am playing with YouTube videos, what am I doing? Where's my attention going? Anyone? Is it wise attention? Especially because I'm about to sit down and meditate. I'm watching a video where two cats are fighting or somebody's killing someone. I'm going to bear the effect of that in a minute when I sit down. Because guess what? The mind is going to play. Remember the mind? The big one. It's going to replay every single thing, and it's not going to stop there. It's going to recreate scenarios based on that trigger which I exposed it to, which means that the person had ayoniso manasikara. Wrong attention or unwise attention. But what we need instead is yoniso manasikara. Yoniso manasikara is what distinguished the teaching of Lord Buddha. This is what allowed him to attain Nibbana. Not just him, every single person. Because they knew where to place the attention on, finally. Finally. Any questions so far? I mean, there must be some questions, right? Yes?
I have a question kind of related to this topic.
Yes. Mm. Mm.
One of the things in the state, they can see things, say that
Mm.
so, of course the critics say
Mm. Well, it would be, I guess, a conjecture on my part, because it's a very specific question about a phenomenon that, well, at least it's not registered by every one of us, at least consciously, and then reported back like in these specific cases. Although there are hundreds of thousands of cases, perhaps in the millions now. But usually the person comes changed, somehow transformed. What happened was basic, the way I see it, is that the very fabric of the illusion was torn. The illusion of reality was torn. That's why they see things vividly. They see things vividly. And it is shocking to the person who comes back and now inhabits this very small body. Small in terms of where and what they felt earlier. They were expansive. They had a consciousness that was spreading all over, and they were able to see things and be in different places. So all that destroys the puny concept that we have of me, myself, and this is who I am. So the whole idea of atta, or self, is shattered for that person. So now they have to, in other words, wrap their mind around the new reality that they touched. And they don't have the tools. But the only thing we can say, or they could consider, is that they are now transformed. So they have this special reverence that I notice towards life. They don't take things as lightly or for granted as they used to. As if they become, by nature, if we can call it that, more mindful now. Because they are now, in spite of themselves. Because this person is now not taking for granted the I, which brings us, interestingly enough, your question actually brings us to the next point that I was about to make, as far as what is it that we are looking at when we're saying we're being mindful. One of the interesting games I like to play with meditators is ask you to see what your left foot is doing without looking. Exactly. Did you see what you did? What is your left foot doing? Is it resting? How? Is it going up and down and then it stops? How about your right hand? What is it doing without moving it? To feel, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, there you are. How about your right thumb? So what you're doing is you're consciously bringing your awareness to this body, which usually is disconnected. In fact, even though we claim these as ours and we give it the umbrella of solidity, my consciousness, me, in fact, we are completely unawares. We're living our life completely blindly, meaning unmindfully with asati. The eye is closed. There's no awareness. Now, when you bring in the mindfulness to any of these objects, something wonderful happens. Let's say you bring it to a person who's very lustful. Who's very lustful. This is an interesting exercise. You can practice on your own. When you feel lust, sensual lust, it could be about food, it could be about sex, whatever. Try to become aware 100% of that, your lust, and see what that does to the lust, the intensity of it. So if it has a gauge of 1 to 10, and it's at 10 trying to break into 11, watch it, observe it, just without judging it, become aware of it. If it's in your body that's you're feeling the lust, wherever it feels the most, maybe it's your mouth, maybe it's your tongue, where is it? Maybe it's just your chest beating fast. Where is it? Just observe it carefully. And what you're going to notice that the intensity is going to start to drop. To the point where gone. Gone. 100% of the time this will happen. That's why sometimes some meditators approach and say, Bhante, I can't practice mindfulness when I'm about to have sexual intercourse with my wife, for example. Why is that? Because the lust disappeared. So mindfulness allows you, remember the thing I said about scalpel? Mindfulness is the scalpel of wisdom. These two are necessary for panya. This is panya. So you are cutting the still frames back to what they were supposed to be. You're no longer buying the 24 frames per second as your reality. So when your body's itching, you're no longer saying, this is my leg, my body is itching, and therefore I am going to reach over and I'm going to scratch it. That means you are buying the whole movie. To use another metaphor, it's like you're sitting in the movie theater, it's dark, and some actor, famous actor, is playing a scene. Let's say Robert De Niro is playing a scene, and you're right there at the edge of your seat, you're watching it, and someone comes in and turns on the light. What happened to the storyline? What happened to the perfect acting, the perfect directing, the soundtrack? You being at the edge of your seat. What happened when the lights went on? Or some guy went and opened up the curtains and went to the bathroom with the lights on. They pulled you back into reality. That's what happened. You came out of the movie. That's what happened. Because it doesn't just take the movie for you to be sucked into the movie. You must convince yourself that this is real, this is real. That's why they're helping you by turning off the lights. That's why they're helping you by adding soundtrack, movie. In some movie theaters, they even have special things, speakers and other things attached to the seat. So you feel some vibration under your seat if it is a car chase, let's say. So you really are pulled into the movie. All in an attempt to keep you dumb, basically. That's what we are. Putujjana is a dumb person. But I guess it's an insult to dumb people because we have to put an effort to stay dumb. Whereas the other person is not trying, it's just they are. So we have to be very careful where sati goes. So we have to be aware. Is sati here or not? Because, remember, the eye itself does not have kilesa, okay? The eye does not have any defilements. The eye itself does not have lust. The eye itself does not have anger. It's just like a mirror. It's the mind that will put its signature on it. And if the mind is polluted with lobha, dosa, which is the anger, moha, the delusion, lobha is the greed, then guess what you're going to see? The object, even if it's a stick figure, the person is going to get turned on by it if they have a lustful mind. That's what they're going to see. And there's a psychological test that sometimes people, I don't know if they still do it in some psychiatric institutions, they would do it. Those institutions are closing, people are being released since the 80s. That's why you see a lot of individuals, unfortunately, who are on the street with severe psychological problems. Anyhow, I don't want to digress more. But what they do is they have a test called Rorschach technique. So basically, it's just blotched paper, blotched with ink. So they blotch it, and then they fold it in perfect halves. And then they open it and let it dry. So there's, they put that thing which doesn't have necessarily a theme to it. And they say, what do you see? Well, they're seeing things that they're seeing in their mind, not on the blotched paper. So whatever they're being triggered, they're saying about what's here. And that's how they're going to be scored. So if a person sees something like this, obviously it's filled up with ink, black ink. The person says, well, I see a person trying to get milk or something. That's interesting. Another person might say, oh, I see a person who's about to kill someone. So basically, what I'm saying is, whatever the lens of the person is, that's what's going to be seen. It's not the thing that is being seen. The object has nothing to do with it. Is this so far so good? I know this is different today because I'm going like really deep because it's the last day of the retreat. So I want to give you some things to really ponder as to what is it that you are being mindful. Where does this take you? Well, this is disassembling the whole movie that you've accepted to be real. It's just still images. That's it. Years ago when I was studying animation, the traditional animation, which is cell animation, you have to draw. For every 24 frames, that means each second, by the way, 24 of these images each second. So when they used to do animation, let's say Bugs Bunny or something like that, for every second, there was 24 different drawings. Now, I had to prepare a reel. Reel is a R-E-E-L. It's a video, basically. You use it as a portfolio. So I had to prepare something to show to some people that I can do this. So I spent about 6 or 9 months drawing something that lasted about 27 seconds. Each of the drawings, was a drawing. And then I had to take it to a special camera person who shot it one at a time, and then we did a movie, 27 seconds. It took 9 months. Drawing by hand. Now, each of these, though, was a still image. It wasn't alive. But we're doing this constantly in our ignorance. When is it that we will look at the body and, let's say, in this case, when you're having a tactile perception, or the nose, right? The nose. It smells things. Today, for example, I got, on the way here, I got into the car and the Grab driver apparently had a very interesting, we call it funky smell in the car. Now, immediately my brain went, this is a terrible ride. Can I get out? I was watching the mind. I said, interesting. The mind was saying, or the body, the nose was saying, I'm picking up some signals. The mind says, what kind of signals? Is it pleasant? Is it painful or displeasing? Or is it neutral? In this case, it was painful because the body said, or the mind said, this is not pleasant smell. What to do? And I said, oh, this is a wonderful time for sati. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's watch this. So this is brilliant. This is brilliant because I am seeing the painful. This is wonderful. Otherwise, the mind said, oh, how could he? He's taking passengers in this car. Like, really? You know, the nose has nothing to do with it. The nose's job is simply to pick up signals. The smell is not the problem, oddly enough. The smell is not the problem. What is the problem when these two come? Let me, did you want to take a picture? Because I'm going to erase. You don't have to, but did you? Before I erase, okay, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah, each of these is a consciousness.
Consciousness is basically chemical process,
And physical.
physical process. How about
But we didn't talk about the mind yet.
this system?
Yes.
So when we die, all these systems are for the consciousness of
Well, the consciousness doesn't die. I know you're up to something. You're talking about nama rupa. I know that was the first question last week. Well, because it is not something to cognitively get. This is where a lot of these commentators have no idea what they're talking about. None. They keep commenting about so and so said this, so in such and such a commentarial work. We see this and this and this. They have no clue. It is experiential, first and foremost. Of course, we have some explanations like the great Sammaditthi Sutta, where Venerable Sariputta talks very much in detail about this. And of course, we have in the Mahanidana Sutta as well, the great discourse on causation. But ultimately, these are just words that we're using to understand consciousness itself. It's like the microscope looking at itself and, at itself. So again, I just use another metaphor. We only can use metaphors. But when you're looking for something specific, like 1 + 1 is 2, which by the way is wrong, because there's no such thing as 1 or 2. It's an approximation. You ask any mathematician, they will tell you. It's an approximation. So now we're getting into theoretical physics and deep. So, but we have to make sense. That's why we just say man, woman, period. But you're more than that. I can't call it the bundle of all metabolic reactions that are taking place in this time and space in this 4 dimensions. No. You just give you a name. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Conventional usage. So we have nama, we have namarupa, we have consciousness. But in Mahanidana Sutta, I think it was, Lord Buddha mentions how you have to have both in order for the embryo to come through. But they also have to have the right kamma to be there. So you might have nama, you have namarupa, and you have consciousness, but the baby, well, not even baby, not even a fetus yet. It's just an embryo coming together, and then something happens, and they break. Consciousness slips from Namarupa. And the woman has a miscarriage. Yes.
What it just first have consciousness? Which thing?
That we are going into the territory of Abhidhamma. I don't remember, I think there might be one or two suttas in the entire Nikaya where you might have a semblance of that, but essentially what people have come up is different interpretations. Some people say the moment the sperm and the egg come together, there is consciousness, descent. That seems to be the consensus. Some have said no, it has to be after a certain time. So I will go with whatever is the consensus in a sense. But remember the Namarupa and the consciousness coming, and they can pull apart because they don't have the necessary karmic merits to be born, whether they're a lizard or a human. There goes that. The vijnana, meaning the consciousness part, is cut off. But it's not developed into these. Now, another thing that sometimes it can be confusing is when we look at the ear, the eye, the nose, we're thinking about the eye, the ear, the nose. That's not it. When in the Dhamma we talk about these consciousnesses, we're talking about the whole process. As I mentioned the other day, the eye includes the eyeball, the actual organ of the eye, but as well as the connections to the cortex of the brain. So the brain and the mind are different when we're studying the Dhamma. The closest way of explaining this that I've come up with, others might share this view, of course, or not, is that the brain is the organ of the mind. The mind is using the brain. But when we say mind consciousness, please don't think here. And don't think the ear or the nose is just these organs. Even though sometimes in translations we say the internal base and the external base. The external is obviously the form. So what I was going to mention is what came up earlier in a few minutes ago, I think, about, let's choose the ear. That's the internal base. But the external is the sound. Right? That's the external. Because you have these two coming together, you have ear consciousness. Make sense? Now, sometimes some people say, oh, ear consciousness also exists. Like the sound exists, or the thing, the visible object that exists that I'm seeing, the red chair, I am seeing it. It doesn't. This is where many people get it wrong, when they look at it as an object itself. It is not. It's simply a result of the two coming together. Okay? Sometimes, depending on your upbringing and how you've processed information in your life, how you understand life, you have a certain way of processing information and understanding things. So conceptually, many of us want to understand this. When you see it, when you read it, when you hear it, okay, it should be going into the system and accepted as a truth. That's not going to be as easy when you're talking about certain things like this. That's why Paticca Samuppada, or the 12 links of causal relation, which is one of the deepest parts of the Dhamma teaching, takes some time to understand. So what you're doing is you're dissecting your reality. It's not easy because you've spent a whole lifetime constructing this Maya, this illusion. So now, because of your meditation and mindfulness practice, you're piercing through your problems. You're looking at this thing called me. Wait a minute. As if you're just discovering that you have been had, as they say in America. You've been had. Like someone pulled a fast one on you. Some magician tricked you. Yes. Yes. Uh-huh.
This consciousness, you know, six sense thing, external source, of that
Yes.
consciousness.
Yes.
The other experience is that all these six sense what that now. Still consciousness.
The mind is still functioning. The body is not. It's like you don't have to go to near-death experience. We've all had dreams. You reach over to grab that bag of gold. Some dreams have that. Or when you reach over and you want to drink that water, that in all intents and purposes does not exist. Or you start crying. Yeah.
Sometimes it's very
That's already, you're just, you're answering yourself, because so many times people think that the brain is the mind. Well, what if the person's brain dead? Some people have gone to coma, okay, or in near-death experiences, and then the person wakes up. There's one classic case where a woman who was declared dead in the hospital. So they didn't have a body bag, they didn't put her in one, so they just had her be on the bed. And they went, they locked the door, they left until they let the family know this and that. Meanwhile, she is floating, these are her words, floating up above her body. She still thinks that she's sleeping or something. And she's floating and she looks out, so she's now going through the walls. They don't exist for her. So which means that she does not inhabit a body anymore. She goes outside and she looks down and she sees a ledge, the window ledge. And underneath, like about 7 meters down, there's another ledge, and on it, there is a shoe, a single shoe that's been left there. And then she's hovering and hovering and hovering. Somehow she comes back to her body. And she knocks and she lets people know. The doctors come, nurses come, they're all surprised, shocked. They test her vitals. She's alive. She's talking to them. So now she is trying so hard to convince them that she had an outer body experience. They're not believing her. Until she says, by the way, the shoe outside, what's the deal with that shoe? So she tells some people, and the doctors, one of them at least, is curious enough, interested enough to test to see if this woman is telling the truth. And they go outside somehow, they go to the rooftop and they look and they see a shoe there. Now there was because the window doesn't open. And there was drapes, there was blinds. So there was and she was locked and she was dead. No way for her to go outside, to go to the rooftop, to look down. And that was the first time that she was there in that hospital. So many questions that no one could answer, other than the fact that she literally was outside of her body and looking at these things. This is only one example. There's countless others that people have said and told. So, but still there is the near-death experience, and also they call it reincarnation studies. I think from West Virginia, there was a professor, Livingston, I think. Stevenson, thank you. Ian Stevenson? Ian. He did, was it 14 cases? 14 cases of reincarnation. So this was done like in the 60s and 70s. And he went all around the world. His researchers went around the world. They even went to where I was born in Lebanon, and they found a little girl there. They went to Sri Lanka. They found someone there. Different cultures, the same phenomenon. The child says, well, this is not my family. My family is over there in that village. I am so-and-so's wife. We have 3 kids, this and that. Meanwhile, she's like 7. So after saying this so many times, they become curious and they take the person to that village. And she just runs to the building, goes up to the 3rd floor, goes up and says, "Hey, how are you?" And the man is like, it's a little girl. He's in his 50s.
You know, experience, I would say that in mind, but you know, they
So I didn't understand. Say it again.
do the experience,
Near-death experience.
can understand the mind.
Uh-huh.
Reincarnation, but
We don't use reincarnation. Rebirth. Well, it's not a matter of understanding. Like one time, one of my teachers years ago said, if you have a tennis ball falling on your head from the sky, what does that mean? Someone's playing tennis. Someone basically hit the tennis ball. That's why it fell on your head. That's why it fell. So you have children born with 1 leg or a heart that's open. And then you have a child over there that's perfectly healthy. Well, now it's becoming harder and harder to say that because of all the stuff that's going on. But let's say people have always been attributing that to some higher power. No, there's no such thing when it comes to the impact that's happening in the world. So we always try to come up with explanations to wiggle our way out of seeing things as they are. But again, I am not going to convince anyone of rebirth. But when you practice long enough, you will start seeing the patterns because you have been dying and being reborn today so many times. Every time you breathe in and out, you actually were dying and being reborn. But we're expecting the actual death of the person in order for me, and then we want to see them going from life to life. Well, no one's going to carry a camcorder, go from one life to the next. That's why you have meditation. And if you practice enough, you will be able to even regress yourself. There's also regression hypnotherapy. I know of someone who practices it. Well, think of it this way. I'm going to use images. That's the only way that I feel comfortable in talking about these things in a tangible way. Imagine you are on your deathbed and you have desires still. You feel unfulfilled. You have a bow and arrow in your hand. The desire is that arrow. It also has your kamma. And you're pulling. The intensity of the desire is the pulling. The moment of death is you letting go. And you're going to be flying to the next life. Wherever you land, it is going to be where your kamma will greet you. It's like when you land at an airport, you go from here to Wellington, New Zealand. You check in your bags at KL International with your name on it. Well, someone shows up at Wellington Airport in New Zealand and they come and say, here's your bags. You checked it in KL. That was your past life. Here you go. Congratulations. Good or bad, here they are, your checked bags. You even paid for them. Excess fee and all. Now you deal with it. So logically, I have failed to see someone truly, fully explain it because it is beyond logic in a sense. Because we, at this point, we want to see things. We want to have things demonstrated to us. And someone might be able to. But think of the consciousness that's carried over. That is the thing. And if you have Namarupa, which it opens up another bag of terms, and it's more confusing. Basically, it involves the 4 elements, mom and dad's seeds, and you have Nama group, which includes attention, intention, contact, feeling, and perception. So these work together. but they still need consciousness in order for the person to start blooming into a person, into a fetus. But we want to just turn the page and say, oh, okay, that's life. Okay, I got it. It doesn't work like that, to my knowledge. I hate to not be able to give you the kind of answer that you hoped, but I'm sure you've been dabbling with that question for a long time. Maybe it's time for you to look elsewhere. I'm not talking about a different religion. I'm talking about here. Because if any religion is going to explain this, and if not, it's the Dhamma. But if even with that you haven't been able to probe it, it means you're looking the wrong place. You got to be able to sit longer than a few minutes. In meditation, you'll be able to see, if you want, after you hit a certain point where upekkha is so solid, it's so present, your mind doesn't shake no matter what happens. This is happening after the fourth jhana, by the way. The mind is so still, even if there's a bomb that explodes next to you, you don't shake. But you're conscious, you're aware. Your mind is still with upekkha. And if you desire, then you can. There are ways where you allow the mind to go into specific directions. You can go to this birth, this birth as Tio, when you were coming out of the birth canal, and you can see yourself. You can hear your mother. You can see the walls, what the calendar is saying, what day it is. No, I'm telling you, these are possible. And I'm not making stuff up, because these are things that I come in interviews and things. And not only that, it's up to the mind. And you don't have to believe or take my word for it. The suttas are full of it. These examples, full of examples where Lord Buddha says, when you have Dibba Chakku, which is the divine eye, you just direct it to whatever life you go. However, the Iddhipada, actually, the Iddhis, I'm sorry, the ability to probe into whichever life you're going to. Let's say you're having a problem now. The meditator says, I wonder where this is coming from. And you just go to that specific location in your past lives, and you will find the behavior, the action, the thing that caused you now to so many lifetimes later have this problem. And that's why I was explaining the other day with Venerable Mahamoggalana having killed his mother and father in many, many eons earlier. And he was seeing how these murderers are there waiting for him to kill him. And after 7 times of escaping from them with his abilities, he's like, wait a minute, why are these people after me? He said, I wonder what I did. He knew it was karma. He just looked, he saw who he was, who his parents were. They were both blind. He got them on a cart and he drove them into the jungle. A few hours later, they get to a point in the jungle. He gets them off and they're trusting him. These are his parents. And he kills them, so that he comes home without them, because his wife didn't want to have to deal with the in-laws anymore. So that was eons and eons earlier. Now he was the chief disciple of Lord Buddha, who was being attacked. So the mind is capable of seeing these things, but you must first allow the mind to come to a restful stop. You will never know these things for yourself if you have an agitated mind. It is impossible. So long as the mind is not calming down, it's simply impossible. That's why the non-agitated mind is at the crux of Nibbana experience. That's why commentators will never taste Nibbana, period, ever. Current commentators or past, so long as they are not practicing. I've had some teachers who keep writing books and things, and they come up with new terms for the Dhamma. Means nothing, because if they're not practicing it, it's just a waste. Instead of writing that next volume, go sit down and meditate and really experience what you're talking about, or want to experience, or want to talk about. And see it for yourself. That's ehipassiko. So when you have these 3 coming together, because of eye consciousness picking up, you will have what? Contact. The thing you're going to, like this morning, I was talking about my experience from this morning, the cab. The contact was having to do with, yes, nose consciousness. And the contact, we don't stop there. It gives us a feeling. There's nothing wrong with the feeling up to this point. Now, when the feeling gets identified with, oh, that's a horrible smell. Now it has turned personal. Now I want to open the door and jump out of the car. Why? It was a feeling. Well, it's a terrible feeling. Oh, okay. It's a feeling though, right? Yeah, but how did you know it's a feeling? Well, because there was a contact. Oh, it was just a pure contact? Yes. I put a signature on the type of feeling, meaning, do I like that feeling or do I not like that feeling? What if it was a pleasant perfume of jasmine or gardenia or rose? Would I have had such a big commotion? See the preferential treatment. So sati has to be there. Oop, the eye is gone. See? The doors of the six senses have to be always kept secure. And the closer you get to see with sati, suddenly the intensity recedes. The next time you have fear, just in your mind, just observe it, really get close, look at it. No judgment, just look at it. Remember the lust I said? If the person is lustful and they just watch the lust, what happens? Similarly, when you're agitated, instead of going with the story, turn on the lights. Turning on the lights means observe it with sati. And suddenly, oh, that's not a big deal. And where did I come up with this idea that this is all hell's going to break, the idea that you have been festering over in the mind? This is living with wisdom. This is using the scalpel of mindfulness. And this is why we meditate. To no longer be fooled by the real Mara, which is sanya. Sanya. Perception, mental associations, making things up when there's none. Perfect example is it's barely lit up and it's dark and you see something that looks like a snake. Looks like a snake, but your brain says, it is a snake. Someone comes and turns on the light and you see it is the wire for the mic. What happened? Sanya, the big deceiver. That's what we have to watch out for. Sanya is the one that eventually is behind us thinking that all these consciousnesses, there's someone behind them. Me. You. When there's none. Okay? This is heavy. Needs processing. That's why I'm glad that it's being recorded. I think it is. Yeah, it's being recorded. So, yes. So I will stop because my throat's beginning to hurt because I still have, in an hour and a half, I'll give the Dhamma talk, the last one of this retreat. So I'll stop it here.